In May 2010, the streets of Kingston, Jamaica became a war zone. Security forces attacked the country's most dangerous gang, the Shower Posse, and its notorious leader, Christopher Dudus Coke. His influence reached from the top of Jamaican politics all the way to the heart of Toronto's drug scene. And it was Canadian police who helped hunt down the Kingston kingpin. John Lancaster traveled to Jamaica to bring us this story.
Far from the sun-soaked beaches of Jamaica lies Kingston, the country's financial and political capital. A city that gangs have transformed into one of the world's most violent places.
And they have been the key drivers for crimes in Jamaica, murders, shooting, robberies.
He was dangerous. His gang was dangerous.
Their deadly tactics were cast in the 1970s when the Shower Posse sided with the country's right-wing Jamaican Labour Party. They literally waged bloody street battles for votes for their political masters. By the 1980s, they controlled much of Jamaica's gun and drug trade. Seemingly unstoppable, they set their sights on America, killing 1,400 people there in turf wars. The entire operation was run out of a small Jamaican garrison known as Tivoli Gardens, an area so dangerous to the uninvited, not even the army or police would enter.
This is the heart of Tivoli Gardens in West Kingston. It's where Christopher Coke and the Shower Posse ruled with an iron fist, but it's also where it all ended for them.
By May 2010, international authorities had had enough of Coke's syndicate. Kingston was placed under a state of emergency as police went searching for Coke. Coke supporters killed 2 officers and burnt a police station to the ground. In turn, Jamaican security forces smashed through Tivoli's barricades. They had an American extradition warrant and pushed deep into the garrison. But Tivoli wasn't the only battle being waged. At the same time, heavily armed police in Canada were fighting the Posse in our own backyards. In Toronto, a series of raids was underway. The Shower Posse was believed responsible for dozens of murders dating back to 1991. By 2010, they had risen to the ranks of Dons, controlling the supply of guns and cocaine to many of the city's street gangs. They had become so elusive, some questioned whether they existed at all.
For anybody who says the Shower Posse is a figment of the police's imagination, what do you say to that?
It exists.
Toronto police detective Doug Backus spent 5 years waiting, watching, and listening to the Posse's communications. Wiretaps revealed the Toronto associates had been keeping a close eye on what was happening to their leader and his turf.
Well, they certainly talked about Christopher Coke's extradition. They talked about Tivoli Gardens, how Tivoli Gardens would be a disaster should they try to extradite Christopher Coke, how the 14 parishes surrounding the area would come together and fight to prevent that.
In all, 13 high-ranking Shower Posse associates were collared and dozens of street-level gangsters. Back in Tivoli, what went down was described by residents as a massacre.
They had me take over this now. They had me take over the whole community center. Nobody couldn't go. They mash up everything in there and take it over.
Wayne Francis is a community leader who showed us the battle scars that remain from the incursion. Heavy caliber gunfire pits many of the buildings.
30 or 40 more heavy artillery rounds.
Yes, man, heavy caliber.
73 people died here, including children and an American visiting his grandmother.
And they took her grandson from her, take him back upstairs, kill him, wrap him up in the sheet and dry him downstairs in front of her eyes. She can't recover up to now. So those are some of the wounds, may I tell us, can't heal, can never heal.
Down the street in Tivoli's Java block, Marjorie Grant says security forces entered her home and dragged her 2 unarmed sons away. They were shot seconds later.
come and look. I see 17-year-old man laid on there, so die.
He's dead.
Yeah, he's dead.
So was her 20-year-old. Her neighbors saw it too.
That's why I lost a brother, but there is a God, and I have my kids and I have to live, but I'm sorry for her. Many more people, some don't even find their dead, I don't know.
You used to look like this before.
Yeah.
Marjorie Hines survived the incursion, but remains disfigured by a bomb that was dropped into Tivoli by security forces. Her husband was shot nearby, and like most of the dead, he was buried in Tivoli's Maypen Cemetery. 20 months later, the graves remain unmarked. Some contain bodies piled on top of bodies. But the intense door-to-door searches failed to locate Coke. It was feared he may have slipped out of Jamaica again. By then, Toronto police wiretaps had picked up intelligence that Coke had entered Canada under an alias. In the months leading up to the incursion, his movements were so closely guarded by the Toronto arm, police could never find him. To this day, the Toronto associates refuse to even acknowledge the posse exists, let alone ties to Coke.
It'll be a death sentence.
No ifs, ands, or buts?
I mean, there might be some exceptions, but for the most part, you're putting your life at a risk, certainly if you're deemed a snitch.
They did admit, though, they were trafficking in guns and drugs. A money trail led to 2 mansions in these hills overlooking Kingston, built by the Toronto associates.
So how long have you been an officer then?
35 years and counting.
The homes, a symbol of Toronto's cocaine trade and the profits being made, according to Jamaica's Deputy Commissioner of Police.
Yes, he in fact had a franchise in Canada, and there were persons there who would have left Jamaica, would have gone to Canada, and then had to send back tribute payment to him. And the tribute payment came back in the form of cash or in the form of illegal guns.
While the noose was seemingly tightening, Coke was still nowhere to be found.
And we have put ourselves the sights.
In Tivoli, Superintendent Terrence Ben's officers were getting closer. They had rounded up hundreds of suspected Shower Posse supporters. They made the Shower Posse's Tivoli headquarters their own. Then, after 30 days, Coke was finally arrested at a checkpoint. He hadn't left Jamaica. He had been hiding out, disguised in a woman's wig and glasses. The Americans quickly whisked him away to stand trial on conspiracy, drug, and gun charges he has since pleaded guilty to.
The entire episode has affected me deeply.
The bloody hunt for Coke forced Jamaica's then Prime Minister to resign in disgrace over his ties to the drug lord. In Tivoli, the man who showered residents with gifts and enemies with bullets is missed to this day, even by those who almost died because of him.
I don't know if I was no bad man. I don't know if that. You understand me? Yeah, he's a nice man. Help the kids, help old people, everybody. He's a man for the whole world. It's a worldwide world for man, trust me.
That one man's arrest has changed an entire country. Since Coke's capture, Jamaica's murder rate has plummeted 32%. And in Canada, those series of gang raids has put Toronto's murder rate at a 25-year low. And crippled both countries' most feared international gang.
If it's alive, it's very dormant. We don't hear any activities that they are integrally involved in.
For now, anyway, Jamaicans can put some of their darkest days of violence behind them. John Lancaster, CBC News, Kingston, Jamaica.